Well, welcome. My name's Dr. Ash, or Ashley Hilton, whichever one you want to call me. And in this talk, we're going to teach you exactly how to get the score that you need in the UCAT that's going to lead to you getting into the dental school or the medical school of your dreams, right? Your top choice. Because as we probably know, I'm sure you guys are aware that the UCAT, which I'm going to explain more about during the course of this talk, the UCAT is a massive part of the medical and dental school application. And it's an exam unlike anything you'll have ever seen before. And I can assure you that. And it can be a bit daunting, but I'm going to really tell you in this, I'm going to give you by the end of this the roadmap that you need to go on and do really well. And it's the kind of the method that we teach at FutureDoc, and every year we're getting better with our performance for our students. And last year we had a 93% success rate with getting students into medical school and dental school. So by the end of this, you'll have a roadmap that will give you a very clear direction towards how to get into, like I say, your first choice medical or dental school. Also, we're going to talk to, at the end, one student who has gone through the process and scored incredibly high. I think the student that's coming later is probably one of the highest scorers we've had in the FutureDoc program. So really, really top level performer. And you can speak to her and how she did it and just kind of get some more practical tips. But, she followed the formula that I'm going to show you. And at the end, like I say, you'll have the roadmap, you'll be able to speak to her. And we'll kind of have a very clear picture of how we're going to make this dream, what is a dream at the moment of getting into medical and dental school, a reality. So like I say, we are only going to see this once. So I would highly recommend that I know what I'm like when I go to webinars sometimes. If I'm not reminded to turn off my phone, to, turn off notifications, to just make it so that I'm really focused and not distracted, that you'll miss bits. And I'm going to send links and I'm going to do all sorts of stuff that's going to make this really, as useful for you as possible. So to make sure you don't miss it, I would highly, highly recommend that you, like I say, turn off and eliminate as many distractions as possible. So with that said, here's a little bit about what we're going to talk about, like I said. So we're going to talk about some myths and misconceptions, the essentials that you need to know. I'm really going to give you the kind of 3 big secrets and, like I say, the roadmap to help you get there. But because we're at an early stage of the UCAT at the moment, people are still probably a bit unaware of everything that it involves. So I'm going to do some fundamentals as well of what the exam's about and kind of how, just how it relates to the whole medicine and dental school application. So what I would say, before we get going, let me just make sure we have everything that we need at my end. Okay, cool. So this is me. I won't bore you too much with who I am, but basically I've got into medicine and into dentistry. So I've done this twice. I've done it in actually very competitive ways, like some of the more competitive ways that you can do it. And it's meant that, I've had to develop really good techniques to get in. And that's basically been my bread and butter for a very long time. And during that time, I founded FutureDoc. I've been an admissions tutor and application specialist and, sat on interview panels to interview prospective medical and dental students. So all of this stuff has been, all of this has contributed to FutureDoc, which is the program that we designed a while ago now that has been almost kind of to teach people what you need to do. And it runs them through the gauntlet of a series of things. And really my goal is to have it to be almost like a formula that if you take a student with a good attitude and a good work ethic, and you can take, within reason, almost anyone and put them through that series of things that they need to do through that program, that they will, as close to as is possible, guarantee that they will get into medical or dental school. Now, nothing in life is guaranteed, but like I say, last year we had 93% success, which is when you think of you've got grads there who have got a 3% success rate, a 3% chance. You've got your dental students who have got about a 15% chance. It's actually pretty amazing that we can achieve that. And it's through like I say, a very rigorous process that we get students there. So I'm going to teach you, obviously I can't tell you it all in just a 90-minute talk, but what we're going to do, but I will tell you like the basics of what we do so that you can at least have the makings and the start of, understanding how to approach it. So enough about me. Let's do a quick visualization. Let's just take a moment. So I'm going to give you, before we go into all of this stuff, what I want to do is I want you to just take a moment just to kind of picture the future of where this is, why we're doing this, because we need to have a bit of a reason why all of this is important, right? You are doing this because you want to become a medical student or a dental student and then go on to be a doctor or dentist. So I just kind of want you to briefly understand two things. So this is the time of year now where it's a lovely time of year. And, I was saying that 93% success rate that we've had. At the moment, we're on track to actually beat that this year. This is a really nice time of year where I'm getting loads of emails from students saying, I've just had my offer, I've just got in, and all of that sort of stuff. And that is a really lovely time of year for the people who were in your shoes this time last year. Now, what I want you to do is kind of picture yourself, firstly, getting that email, or what it's going to feel like having gone through the medicine or the dental application, and kind of getting to this point next year where you have got that offer at your dream medical or dental school, and really picture what that's going to be like. What's it going to be like to have that email come through to say that you've been given a place, to be getting ready and getting prepared for going to, is it in London? Is it up in Newcastle? Is it in Cardiff? Where is it? And where would you like to go? And really picture vividly where it is you see yourself studying. And then I want you to picture what it's going to be like doing your first couple of days or a week at dental or medical school, how that's going to feel to go there and to be learning stuff that is skills that are really going to impact people's lives, people's health, people's well-being, and you're going to learn those skills that are really going to make a massive difference in people's lives, because that is to help you understand why we're putting all this effort in. What is the point of all of this mystery test that is the UCAT? Like, why are we bothering to go through the grueling preparation that is required to kind of do well in a very unusual exam that this is? So imagine that, and then also I want you to picture yourselves now towards the end of university, and you're graduating, and you can imagine that picture, and you're wearing the mortarboard, and you're with your family or your nearest and dearest, and then you're going to be starting your first job as a doctor or as a dentist. Because I can tell you the very first time that, like, one of my the memories that stick in my head most are my graduation day, but then also the very first day working as a junior doctor, because I did medicine before I did dentistry. That one is very vivid in my mind. And then the very first time that my skills were really called into action to save a life, essentially, when a patient was really sick. It kind of happened probably within about 4 or 5 days of my very first job. And, that's that kind of Karate Kid moment. I don't know if you guys have seen the Karate Kid, but you learn all these skills, and some of them you don't necessarily understand why you're learning them straight away. But then when they get put into practice, that is when you have your first moment of like, holy crap, this is actually not only a really interesting and amazing skill to have, it's now, I've seen it very tangibly save a life. And that's the whole point of why we're doing all of this, right? We're here to, like, the UCAT will seem like a very abstract thing at the moment, but it's very real in our journey towards doing something that is going to be very impactful, very meaningful, and just a super important thing to keep that at the front of your mind, because it's ultimately leading to a very important thing. So, enough of that. Let's talk a little bit more directly now about the UCAT. And like I say, I'm going to give you kind of a bit of a formula after we've gone through some basics, and we'll give you a bit of a formula. And then, like I say, towards the end, we're going to talk to one of our students, and we're also going to talk about how you can, nothing's guaranteed, but how you can massively improve your chances of doing everything that you need to get where you want to be. Okay, so firstly, if you want to pop some questions in the chat, I would absolutely love to hear kind of what your understanding is so far. If there's any particular concerns, I'll do some polls throughout, and we're going to start with a few polls. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about kind of where your heads are at with what you would like to know, what you're worried about, maybe any fears, any probably misconceptions, because as you saw at the start, we're going to talk a little bit about that. So let's see. Can good UCAT score compensate for average GCSEs? Does it work the same for grad med courses? Okay, we'll come on to all of that stuff. Anything else? While we're doing that, I'll get ready for the next thing. When should we start UCAT revision? We'll talk about that. Is it impossible to drastically improve your score? I'd say the short answer to that is no. So one thing I'm going to encourage you is you're probably in a position where you have exams right now, and you're probably thinking, oh, I'm just going to pay some rudimentary attention to the med school application or the dental school application, and then I'll come back and focus properly on it when we have when those exams are out of the way. Now, what I would say is, especially if you're thinking of like, I don't know, getting some help, like say from us, for example, so the thing is that you can start the stuff that leaves everything kind of ticking along in the background while you then divert your attention back to exams. So it's really important to get this stuff started early. And I'll talk about the different kind of levels of preparation, but the kind of basic prep that you can have ticking along in the background is really important so that you're not kind of stressing yourself out and cramming towards the end. And this is where the UCAT falls into like one part of everything else of the med school application. It's not just about the UCAT. It's about how your preparation for the UCAT ties in with everything else. Because you'll have probably seen me do a video on YouTube, which I did in the emails running up to this, ask you to watch, is the 4 phases of application. And if you can compartmentalize your preparation, that you take care of some of the annoying but low kind of brain, low brain strain stuff ahead of time, you can clear the space to really focus on the UCAT and absolutely kill it when it comes to it. And please, one of the things that I'd like you to take away from this is please don't think, oh, it's fine, I'll deal with it in the summer. Because every summer, and I mean every summer without fail, we get, we get a ton of people who come to us who have made this exact mistake, and they come and they want help because they've left it too late, and now we're kind of scrambling around, we're cramming, and we have to, we can still help these people and we can still get them in, but we're very compromised on what we can offer. We're very compromised on kind of what options are available to us. And, it takes that dream med school and kind of goes into well, let's see where we can get in. And everyone always, well, not everyone, but a lot of people will make that mistake or fall into that trap of thinking that, I can just kick it down the road until after my exams, and you leave yourself a really big task to do. And what I'm not saying is that we're going to start preparing for the UCAT tomorrow. What I'm saying is we're going to look at the whole package, and we're going to look at the bits maybe of the UCAT that we can do, and then incorporate that into a well-planned, well-prepared strategy for how we're going to get into university. Now, the way I've actually just been reading, last time I gave a talk, I was reading some cookbooks, but I don't read them all the time. But I was reading a cookbook yesterday, and it talks about how, if you go to a really top-notch restaurant, one of the Michelin star ones or the really high-level ones, you'll see how calm and quiet everything is. And it's because they have done something, I think the stat is like 80%, like it's a really high percent of the prep has been done ahead of time, so that when it comes to actual service, all they're really doing is just piecing everything together. The slow braised lamb or whatever you've had that's been cooked over 8 hours. Well, 7 of those hours have been cooked way before. I should probably get a nice diagram to illustrate this because, that's exactly kind of how it works. The majority of the prep has been done before time, and then they just come and execute on that. And like I say, that is almost a performance in itself. And that's exactly how I want you to treat the UKAT. It's a performance. So I'm kind of going off on one now. Let's get back to the main thing. So like I say, I did promise you a few little polls just to keep you engaged. So it'd be interesting for you guys to see exactly what everybody else is thinking. So if I can find these polls, where have I put them? Let me see if I can find I've made these polls ahead of time, but now polls and quizzes. There we go. So let's see here. Let's do this one. So let's talk about the UCAT's importance. So I want you to tell me in this poll, I've just put it up now, is how important would you say the UCAT is? So kind of, is it the number one most important thing? Is it very important, medium importance? It depends, not that important. Okay, so I'll give you another 10 seconds to cast your votes. Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's end the poll there. So let me just show you the results. So we have about 83% are saying it's very important. 14% are saying it's the number one most important thing, and then a couple of people have said it's of medium importance. Okay, well, what I would say is that it's hard to kind of say for sure exactly how quantifiably important it is, but I would say probably on the very important scale. Now, what the problem that I would say people have with the UCAT is that there's this simultaneous, I'm trying to show myself here. You can tell I'm absolute pro at, hold on, speak. Okay, fine, let me just reshare. There's this simultaneous thing with the UCAT where it's equally overvalued and underestimated. Now, those things seem like juxtaposed things, but what happens is that people, firstly, don't understand what type of exam the UCAT is. So they think that it's just like any other exam, and just by coming and watching some YouTube videos and by just understanding some basic concepts, that they're going to do well in it. And there's this kind of false sense of security that people get. And oftentimes, like I said earlier, oftentimes people will leave it a little bit too late, and they will not kind of give themselves the space and the time to adapt to the type of exam that it is, but also to just put the prep in that they need to get the score that they need. Now, they underestimate it like that, but they also overvalue it, that they think that the UCAT is the most important part of the whole med school application. And no one part is the most important part of the med school application, or when I say med school application, you can interchange that with dental school application as well. But it's like saying, the analogy I always give is like saying, what's the most important organ? Is it the heart, the lungs, the brain? Well, you're not going to get very far without any of those. So you need the whole package. You need all elements of the application to be firing. So it's super important to just think of the UCAT as part of the application. So it means that all the other elements, and you've probably seen on the YouTube channel me talk about the 5 key elements of a really good application. And so it's important to, like I say, have it as part of the whole package. Now, the only caveat that I would say this year is that, as you probably know, there used to be 3 exams, in fact. One was a graduate exam called the GAMSAT, which is remaining. There's the UCAT, and then the third one is the BMAT. Now, the BMAT was one that only, I think it was 7 medical schools used to take. But the the 4 big ones really that took it were your Oxbridge, so Oxford and Cambridge, and then Imperial and UCL, 2 of the London medical schools. So now they have pretty much all, I think they've all officially now said that they're going to be using the UCAT this year. So essentially, this year, it's super, super important. And like I say, it's still part of the application and it's not the be all and end all. A good UCAT score will not get you into medical school, but a bad UCAT score will stop you getting into medical school. But bad is like subjective based on kind of how it compares to all the other bits. So like I say, it's about having the whole package. But one of the things that I always see is that people, like I say, the mistake of people thinking that it's just about getting a good UCAT score is that they will be able to get to interview, but they'll not get past interview. So if you can get a 3,000 plus and you do nothing else, you will get in front of the MMI panel or the interview panel. You'll get in front of the universities probably. But then they will see that you're not, a good candidate. You're not the real deal. You've not done all the other prerequisite stuff that you need to build a strong application. And then, that will be the end of the application for you. So just a word of warning with all these traps. Just make sure, so make sure that you don't underestimate it and overvalue it. So how important is UCAT? That's where I should have done that poll, sorry. So what is the UCAT? So, like we said, it's a very unusual exam. It's an exam that is almost like an IQ test at speed, but it combines loads of different things. But here's kind of the crux from the UCAT website of what it says. So it's a 2-hour computer-based test with 5 sections, which tests. It's a test of skills, not a knowledge exam. So this is the bit that trips people up the most, or is so unusual for them, because, like I say, it's I want you to treat it as a performance rather than a knowledge exam. So if you are at the stage where you've only sat GCSEs, you're about to sit A levels, or even some people who are as far as university, you will have probably not done an exam like this. This is a bit of an assault on the senses in that it requires you to perform tasks or to work out puzzles or to decipher some decision-making type, some kind of logical type conundrums at speed. So the 2 things, you might want to write this down, the 2 the 2 top things that you need to do to perform well in the UCAT are obviously accuracy, you need to get the answers right, but speed. The biggest, I think I had a question coming up about this, but I'll just tell you the answer now. The biggest cause of people not performing well in the UCAT is running out of time. And I always give the analogy. It's a balance between going at a speed that you can sustain and get through the exam. That's gonna, when you're going fast, you might make a few errors. The faster you go, obviously, the more errors you'll make. But it's a pace that's acceptable to compromise a few answers on to make sure that you get through the test. So the analogy that I always give is, I need to remind myself of the numbers here. So if you go through, that's it. So if you go through getting 80% correct of the test, but you only make it to 80% through the test, you'll get 64%, right? But if you go through getting 70% correct and make it through 100% of the test, you'll get 70%. And that's the kind of thing that I want you to think about. You need to balance accuracy with speed, but speed is the thing that trips people up the most. So some of the techniques I'm going to show you are going to be that maintaining the speed, but also increasing the speed, but whilst maintaining a certain level of accuracy. And says here, most universities require the UCAT pretty much this year, other than the grads who are going to GAMSAT universities. Pretty much all of them will require the UCAT this year. So that's why this year is more important than ever. So here's how the test works. So it's 2 hours in total. You have a minute between each of these sections. And here's the breakdown, basically. You have The verbal reasoning goes first, then the decision making. So it'll be 21 minutes of this, a minute break, 21 minutes of this, a minute break, 31 minutes of this, a minute break, 25, and so on and so forth. So you can see some of these, the number of seconds per question is really, really low. So, for example, here with the abstract reasoning, which is actually, funnily enough, in the last couple of years, the area that people have been scoring the highest on, this is the one where you get 14 seconds per question, so you can imagine. So how's it scored? So you have, like I say, you have 5 sections. The SJT that I want to show you about, this is more of, so this is the kind of ethics, it's ethics as well, but this is the more kind of judgment of, or situational awareness, should I say, of you get given scenarios and it's testing you on how you would act and what you think is the best way to proceed in a certain situation. So really important to understand that this final section is very different to the rest. So first 4 sections, you're given a numerical score. So the lowest you can possibly score on the UCAT is 1,200 because you have 4 sections and the lowest you can get in each is 300. So that brings you to your 1,200. The highest you can get in each is 900. And so obviously combined, that's a 3,600. Then the situational judgment is basically based on a band 1 to 4. 1 is the best. 2 is still decent. 3 and 4, if you get a 4, that makes it very difficult to get in. If you get a 3, it also makes it very difficult to get in. So you want to be aiming for the top 2 bands, and that's usually about 55% of takers. I'll show you the stats in a bit. Now, the UCAT, you will get your score immediately. Now, they have deciles. They publish deciles. So by deciles, I mean, the top 10% of people got this score, the next 10% got this, and so on and so forth. You get your score immediately, but you don't know what decile you're in, but it's usually roughly the same every year, give or take 1 decile. Because when you've sat your test, they won't have had all the data from everybody who sat the test because not everyone will have taken it at that stage. And then, so then you have to kind of have a rough idea of where you lie. But normally, it's actually the raw score that matters rather than the data, the decile itself. The most important thing to remember of this is that you get 1 attempt per cycle. So you don't get any retakes. You can't do it again. If you, like I say, if you don't get a great score, there is still, by having a good application in all the other elements, you can still compensate for it. If you're a grad, you can think about the GAMSAT. In previous years, we would think about the BMAT. But essentially, if the UCAT, if you really, really bomb the UCAT, there is, there's no second attempt. And that's why we need to make sure we kind of are getting on the ball with that. So in the chat, does anyone want to tell me what they think a good UCAT score is? So like I say, it's anything from 1,200 to 3,600. What do they think is a good UCAT score? And you can add the bands as well if you want. I kind of told you the bands, but I'll take a sip of water while we're getting that. Yeah, so we've got 2,800, 2,900, 2,700. Okay. Well, the name of the the name of the talk is a bit suggestive with saying that it's 3,000 plus, but 3,000 will put you in the top. It depends on, like I say, it depends how the year goes, but 3,000 will put you in the top 3 to 5% of takers. So that is one way to really, really take control of the application. If you're a grad, you've got to bear in mind that if you're a grad, you have a 34 applicant to 1 place ratio. So for grads, we really need to just, have everything about the application just absolutely firing and on point. If we're, for the undergrads, there's a little bit of leeway, but ultimately, we want to get a UCAT score that is going to take control of this application. And this is one area that you can stand out. And by doing well in this, we can do that. Now, it doesn't mean that if you get a 2,700 you can't get in. But like I say, if you want your pick of all the med schools, if you really want to make the application as plain sailing as possible, the higher the score, that is just one element that is going to make it easier for you, and more likely that you're going to succeed. Yeah. Was there anything else I was going to say on that subject? No. Okay, fine. So let's move on. So here we go. Here are the stats. So last year, that's what I was going to say. Yeah. So the thing that we're seeing with this is that the UCAT, despite what anyone says, if it's a repeatable exam, anything that is a repeatable exam is teachable. It's designed by humans with a logical brain as to how they designed it and what they want to do. So therefore, if it's replicable, if they can replicate it, you can teach it. So ignore anything that says, you can't prepare for this, because that's just a stupid thing to say. Like, any test that you do over and over again, you will, by the very nature, learn from it and get better at taking the test. So ignore any of that nonsense. Now, what we're seeing, though, is, as you can see, there's steady, and especially COVID was a big bump. And it's a shame that we don't have it's a bit pointless to have beyond 5 years ago, because it was a different time. But you'll see also that it's been steadily going up throughout the years. Had a massive bump during COVID because everyone was at home and had nothing better to do than abstract reasoning practice, by the sounds of it. But we can see that grade inflation is becoming a thing. So we need to make sure that we're competitive with that. So this is the average score, right? This is so an average score will probably get some people to scrape a place at the less competitive universities, and significantly above. Well, I say significantly, an above average score. Some people will still get places. You'll see on the university stats, like the lowest UCAT score that someone got in with, but that is those are a couple of anomalies, and I really wouldn't look too closely at that. You can get in with maybe an average score, but I would really, really not want to risk it. And as I say, we want to have this on lock so that we can focus on all the other elements that are going to get us not just to interview, but past interview. So let's have a look here. So then here are the deciles. This is probably more what we're looking at, what we want to focus on. So really, we want to aim for, the reason that we do well on our program is that my goal is always to just aim for the best, aim to be the best in every element of the med school application, and then the rest, the dental school application as well. And, the rest will take care of itself. So we want to aim that magic number of 3,000 plus means that we are in, like I say, we're talking about deciles here. So when we're talking in beyond that, we're talking about the top 5%. That's how we want to do that. We want to make sure that we are really just absolutely killing this, so that we are doing as, just like the way that I say it to my students is, if you were to rank your application out of 100 to give you a score, we want to aim to be a 100 out of 100 application. And by being above 3,000, whatever points we allocate to UCAT of that, getting a 3,000 will put you there. So really important to just take control of the application that way. Bands, like I say, so if you see here, kind of, it's not always, it's kind of roughly anything from 55-ish% so let's say 50% to 2/3 are always in the top two bands. So we want to be aiming for a band 1, of course, but equally, being in the top 2 bands is what's really important. And different universities will look at these scores differently. They will, some will almost ignore the SJT as long as you don't fall below a certain level. Some will weight it, so you'll get 5 points if you get a band 1, 4 points if you get a band 2, and so on. Not necessarily that, but that sort of thing. And then some will use the SJT band, and weight it significantly higher than the other stuff. So it depends on the university. And this is where I talk about how the application, it's about a rounded application, because it's also about choosing universities that suit your individual performance, and not just your UCAT score, but your strengths, your individual weaknesses, what you have on your CV, what you have on your application, obviously your personal preferences. So it's about choosing stuff that's, really granularly about you, and universities that you're just very likely to get offered a place at based on your individual credentials. A big mistake that people make, because I was saying before, every year people will come to us who didn't get in. So that for whatever reason, they've had 2 or 3 failed attempts by themselves, and then they come to us, and then, we'll help them, and we pretty much always get them in. And it's partly, how they've been preparing for the UCAT, but it's partly choosing universities that, you look at these sorts of stats that they have, and you think, well, you were never going to get into those universities because you've chosen really badly. But people go for kind of like generic rules of thumb, whereas you should really be tailored to your individual performance, if you will. Okay, so I think I've got a poll here for this. I'm not doing so well with the polls at the moment. Let me see if I can get my... I was going to say sort my poll game out, but that doesn't give the right impression, does it? So let's do this. So let me see. I think I've got... Okay. I think I've got one here. Okay, here we go. Yeah. So so in the poll now, why do people score poorly on the UCAT? So in the poll, just pop a little, let's see what people are saying. And I'll have a quick look at the chat while people are doing that. Can a good UCAT score compensate for average GCSE grades? Definitely. Like I say, it's part of the whole package. It's not gonna do everything. It's not gonna kind of compensate for everything, but it's always a balance, right? And we want to get the balance as good as possible. There are some universities that aren't so focused on GCSEs as well. So that's where we're talking about, where do I look? Where do I apply to? Again, this is where it's a very individual choice. I mean, again, just to go back to the whole, it's the application as a whole. University choices, we spend hours with our students going through, for them, not just like somebody with this UCAT score and this background. It's like them with this, go really into the weeds with these strengths, these weaknesses, these elements of their application, really going in depth into that person and where they're very likely to get offers. Or, the other thing is when people go, well, I really want to get into King's College London, or, whatever, like how do we tailor that person, mold that person to be the kind of person that will get chosen by them? So anyway, let's have a look at the results. So, a lot of you were listening earlier, which is good to see. So probably the biggest one is running out of time. But running out of time comes from incorrect technique and all of that sort of stuff. So good techniques, good speed, good pacing, and just understanding, like being able to go through accurately at speed is the key. So yeah, just exactly what I said earlier, basically. So let's keep going. So here's the UCAT timeline. Now, I think this was these dates. I think my team have updated this, but just double check these. But anyway, the most important ones are the testing window. So the testing starts in July and it ends towards the end of September. So quite a long, probably about a 10-week, probably even more than that actually. A long testing window. So I was talking about how those phases of med school application or dental school application, and how you tailor, kind of like pan all of those things out, and how taking care of them earlier on means that you can focus on can kind of like almost square certain parts of the application off, have them finished, so that you can then focus on the next bit. So it's really important to kind of time that with regard to when you can sit the UCAT. So you have a wide window to do this. Now, historically, people who do it earlier on do better, sorry, because I guess it's just, I'm not sure. I can only speculate as to why that is, but usually the preliminary results, when they release them, because they release preliminary results at the start of September to show you how the first half are doing, how the first half of takers have done. Usually the score is always higher. The average score is always higher than the one it ends up being. So I don't know. Read into that what you will. But anyway, so the most important things are the testing window. Obviously, you've got the UCAS deadline to submit your application, but here's probably the most important one: is the booking opens. And again, I'm not sure whether my team updated this to this year's one, so don't quote me on this, but it will be around that sort of time. The thing with the application, so with the opening date, is it if you live in a busy city and you want a popular time, you better be on there as if it's like, a ticket to a hot concert that you want to go to, because it really is kind of like, be on there at the time it opens and be ready to book your place, because they go fast. So that's my kind of big warning for that. Here's how it ties in. You can download this for free on the FutureDoc website. I'll pop that in the chat now, actually. So on the FutureDoc website, you can get a copy of this. We're actually just going, as you can probably tell, this branding is different to this branding. And that's because we've just gone through a rebrand, which we're slowly kind of like trickling out. But so we'll have a new version of this, and we'll remove the BMAT and all of the obsolete stuff on there. But ultimately, your journey to med school application, if you're submitting it this September and October, you've probably got about a year from now until you get your offer. So we've still got people interviewing over the next about next 6 weeks or so. We've still got people doing interviews, and like I say, it's a really nice time of year because we're getting a lot of people now who are having their offers and just gearing up and getting ready to go to med school. But here's where everything ties in, and like I say, I think I've got a slide. Okay, fine. But on the channel, check out the 4 phases of med school application, and obviously it applies to dentistry as well, for how to really build and prepare and do it methodically and intelligently to, like I say, be that like elite chef kitchen that you just do things very well and load the bases or set things up for it to just execute perfectly and minimize the risk of failure, basically. So what does each section of the UCAT consist of? I'm not going to go too much into this, but basically, in a nutshell, the verbal reasoning is probably the most time pressured. This is the one this is the reading one. It's about verbal comprehension, or reading comprehension, if you will. And it's about reading passages, and they'll ask you nitpicky questions about each passage, and you have to answer kind of true, false, or can't tell, or they'll give you some, like they'll have a lead into a sentence, and then they'll have 4 follow-ons, and you have to kind of work out which one is the most correct. That's the most time-pressured one. Decision making is more the logical side of things, where you'll probably get longer questions, and here are all of the little bits that you can, like types of question that you can have. Then we have the quantitative reasoning, which is the arithmetic and maths side of things. So it'll be lots of calculations and questions at speed. Abstract reasoning is the more, you'll see, if you look at the YouTube channel, I've done some, what have I done? Some videos on kind of like how to do this, and there are shapes, and it's like more the IQ test side of things. So I would recommend going on there. Again, the YouTube channel is like a taster, so try not to use YouTube as your number one resource for doing well in the UCAT. It can give you the fundamentals, but you probably need something a little bit deeper to really give you the strategies and the techniques really to do well. So yeah, and I'll show you a resource in a minute that we can do. And then finally, you've got your, what would Jesus do type questions of like ethics and morality and what you should do in a given circumstance. So how to prepare. Like I say, it is all about kind of being methodical and kind of, I guess, going about it in a very structured way. So this is the method that we teach at FutureDoc. Obviously, this is the very basic version of it. But what we teach is, firstly, you want to familiarize yourself. Then you want to start practicing questions. And then you want to start increasing the speed. That's basically the progression. Because you first want to lay the foundations with good knowledge and good technique and know that you're doing the right things. And then you speed up. The analogy that you'll have, if you've watched anything that I talk about, I've said it a million times. My kind of analogy is compared to sprint training, because sprint training, firstly, you need to have good technique, but you also, well, that's probably more the phase 3, but you need to have good technique first, and then you start really cranking up the speed towards the end. And I'll kind of come on to that more in the phase 3 bit that I explain, because that's, that's when kind of pacing really matters. So familiarization, like I say, YouTube is a good starting point and gives a good overview. Courses are really, I think online courses are the best. I'm not a big fan of books because it's an online test, it's a computer test, and like going from books to screen is a difficult transition, and it's one that you're going to have to do at some point. So you might as well just transition from the start. And then, things like deep dives and stuff like that. We do a lot of official UCAT talks. We get people in externally from UCAT to come and give really good, fundamentals lessons and, and then the cherry on top sort of stuff that's going to get people 3,000 plus. Then, implementation. So practice questions. I would just recommend that you go away and look at the video that I made called the best UCAT preparation guide on the YouTube channel. Let me just put the YouTube channel in the chat. Just as a quick question for everybody, just a yes or no in the chat. Do people follow my YouTube channel? Do you watch it? Yes. Yeah. Great. Oh, okay. Mostly yes. Okay. I've got one nah. Yep. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, anyway, I'll pop the link in the chat anyway, so you can find that. And I would recommend that you go to a video called "The Best UCAT Revision Guide" or "The Best UCAT Revision Plan," and that will give you kind of like a really good explanation of this 3-step process. But yeah, then you want to be, so essentially once you've understood the basics, you want to then go and practice some questions untimed, and then you want to get some time practice. Now this is where I was saying earlier, every summer we get people who come to us who have kind of tried to shortcut this process and come a bit late because they have underestimated it. And like a lot of people will come to us for help, right? And what we always say is, like, if you start thinking about this stuff now, it's so much better, and you'll make the whole process so much nicer for yourself and so much and significantly less stressful. It's because with, like, for example, with the one-on-one lessons that we do, for example, we kind of like, we're training that knee-jerk reaction to, like, you see this question, it's instant. You don't even think about it. You just go to this technique, and that's where that speed and accuracy is really increased. And then towards the end, we're kind of thinking about time practice. Well, not kind of. We're fully thinking about time practice. And this is the bit that I talk about that's a bit like sprint training, where we have, high intensity, but then lots of rest, and just, punctuate it with periods of rest like that. That's the one that I was talking about. I've just done a new video on that. So yeah, the YouTube channel for UCAT plans are really good as a kind of overview. I'm not sure why that slide's there, but yeah. So essentially, if you guys want some help I think, yeah, these are just slides to say that if you guys want some help, you've probably, if you're on the email list, you'll have probably seen that we've been selling out quite a lot lately. So, as I say, this time of year, we only have limited space. So every time people graduate, as in get a place at medical or dental school, and places open up, we then kind of can open up for applications again. And actually, I haven't announced it yet, but I was probably going to put it out either later today or tomorrow that we do have a few more places that we're going to open up. Like I say, in the next either today or tomorrow. So if you guys want to get ahead of that, does anyone would anyone be interested in applying to the program? Do you want me to put the link of where you can apply before, so you can kind of get in ahead of the rest of the public that I'm going to announce it to. Okay, perfect. All right, cool. I'll pop in the chat. So the price can vary. It kind of goes from anything from about £180 a month to it depends how much support you need. I'd recommend that you go for, like, we've got a fundamentals program and we've got an intensive program. Now the 93% correlates more to the intensive program, but obviously people still do well with the fundamentals. But the way that we have that is people apply to that program, and then we can kind of talk a little bit more. If you're successful with the application, we can talk a little bit more about all of that on the actual call itself. I won't bore everybody else with it who's not interested in applying. So, like I say, get your application. I'll tell you what. I'll give you guys until this evening to submit your applications. So I've put the link in the chat. I'll give you guys till this evening before I put the announcement out. So that gives you time to get your application in before it all closes or gets filled up. You can get ahead of the queue, should I say? So there you go. So that's in the chat now. Cool. Okay. Perfect. So, right. So, where are we? Okay. Yeah. So I don't know. One of my team put this together, so I'm not sure. I guess what she's saying here by putting this in is that, we, as you can probably tell from what I've spoken about, we do things very differently at FutureDoc. And if to get the sort of results that we're getting, you have to, do things go a bit deeper with this sort of stuff and really invest in personal relationships with people. So, if you're with us, if you get in with our program, we'll take care of you. You're with us, and then that's it, really. We'll make sure that we do everything we need to get you where you want to be, and we'll work very closely with you. So I think that's why they put that slide in. But anyway, so let's move on. So, like I said, every year we have lots of people on our program who get over 3,000. And today we've got one of those people with us. So, Alia, are you around? I don't see you on the list, but I'm sure you're there. Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, I'm here.
So, why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience of the UCAT and kind of any major tips that you have for people and what you'd recommend? I'm sure they would love to hear it.
Yeah. So I applied last year. I'm in graduate medicine now, and I scored 3,180 on the UCAT Band 1. I was with FutureDoc, and it was my second time sitting the UCAT. So the first time I sat the UCAT, I got 2,800. The second time I sat it, I got 3,180. I was kind of thinking about it yesterday in preparation for the session, and there really were some huge differences in how I approached the exam both times. So the first time I sat the UCAT, I probably didn't start my revision until about 3 weeks before the exam. I didn't feel very prepared for it, so I booked one of the last possible exam slots, which was in September. I think it might have actually been the last possible day that you could sit it. That meant, because I was in year 13 at the time, that meant that I was preparing for the UCAT at the beginning of year 13, and then because of that I fell behind at school, which is a bit of an aside, I guess, from scoring well in the UCAT. But I remember doing UCAT questions during lessons when I really should have been engaged, and then I fell behind, and then I struggled to catch up with my A levels later on. The only thing I did the first time that I sat the UCAT was Medify, and I would do the sections that I found easier or the sections I found more entertaining. So I used to find abstract reasoning just really fun. Like I would just sit there for hours and do abstract reasoning questions. And I found QR quite boring, and I barely did any QR questions. So despite the fact that I was doing maths at A level, QR was actually my weakest section. And my prep was just quite inconsistent. And then the second time I sat the UCAT, I started prepping 6 weeks on the dot before my exam, which I would say is probably the perfect time frame to start prepping for the exam. I would say any more than 6 weeks isn't really going to make that much of a difference. But any less than 6 weeks, you kind of do start to disadvantage yourself a little bit. I dedicated a specific amount of time every day to prepping for the UCAT. So it was about 2 hours, which is enough to do a full mock if you want to do a full mock. And I started doing full mocks pretty early on, so in the first week. I made sure I was distributing my time equally between the different sections, if not doing more of the sections that I found more challenging. So things like VR versus sections like AR, which, like I said, I enjoyed. I also didn't just do Medify the second time that I sat the exam. So I also studied, I guess, the theory behind the different sections. Dr. Ash has a really, really good course with FutureDoc, like a series of videos on the UCAT for this, and I watched every single one of those videos, and it was really, really, really good. There are patterns in how the UCAT questions are asked, and once you understand that, you can start to get really, really good at picking them up. And then, like I said, I was with FutureDoc, and I attended all the UCAT sessions that were being run. So they did live mocks. There were talks where they would bring in people who were kind of experts in the UCAT, and again, that really helped me kind of understand the exam like inside out. So in terms of like what I would say are my like top tips for the UCAT, the first one would be, like I said, start around 6 weeks before. Don't really need much more, any less. You start to disadvantage yourself. Practice is the best prep for the UCAT, and you want to simulate the exam as much as possible. So that means you want to be doing, especially in the kind of like the 2 week run up to the exam, you want to be doing mocks around a similar time to when your exam will be. So if your exam is at 11 a.m., you want to sit mocks at 11 a.m. And you want to dedicate a specific amount of time to the UCAT every day and stick to it. I would also say that you want to identify the sections that are your weakest as early as possible, and you want to kind of attack them. That means you're going to want to sit a mock quite early on. People tend to kind of use the ones on the UCAT website for this, and you want to figure out which section is your weakness. And most people, it is verbal reasoning. I hated verbal reasoning. I loved abstract reasoning. I had to make sure that I was allocating much more time to verbal reasoning. It's so easy to just practice the sections that you're good at and then not those that you aren't, and you really don't want to fall into that trap. I would also say you want to book the exam early. The slots tend to fill up really fast, and also you want to sit the exam as early as possible. Like Dr. S said before, people who sit the UCAT early tend to have better results. This is probably because they're the people that are likely to be more prepared. People who haven't prepped as much will tend to delay it as much as possible. You want to use September to kind of finalize your application, your personal statement. And for those of you that are still in school, like September is when school's going to start, and you don't need to be prepping for the UCAT at the beginning of year 13. It's much, much easier to just get it out of the way in summer. And I will say, like, practice is the best prep, but knowing the exam inside out and studying the different types of questions that can come up really, really does help. And that was one of the major differences between me the first time I sat it and the second time I sat it. I learned the theory behind the questions in much more depth. And I will say that the UCAT really is a preppable for exam. You can do well on it, even if you don't like the exam very much. Like Dr. Ash said, it's not really like your school exams in that you can just memorize things and regurgitate it. But there are patterns in the UCAT questions. And with time and with practice, you can get really, really good at spotting those patterns. Don't let the UCAT intimidate you. And finally, just don't overcomplicate things. Pick a few good resources that you can trust. I can really vouch for FutureDoc in that I feel like it really, really did help me. Not just with the UCAT, but then with the interviews, which was really like my biggest like weakness. So I used FutureDoc and I used Medify. Those were my two resources, and I didn't go outside of that for prep material. I find that when you're jumping from resource to resource, you can just kind of end up skimming the surface and not really get like super deep into it, if that makes sense. But yeah, there's something.
Thanks, Alia. And yeah, I think Ali's also being very humble because so a jump of like 400 plus, well, so nearly 400 in a UCAT score is really good as a before and after. But also, what I didn't say is that Alia got into Newcastle, which is so Newcastle grad, and she's also kind of an expat slash kind of semi-international applicant. So going into so like I said, grad is about 34 applicant to one place. 34 applicants to one place. But Newcastle, their grad program is like the highest UCAT requirement, and I think it's something like 42. It was 42 the year before. I'm sure it's probably something similar the year you applied, Alia. But yeah, getting into Newcastle grad is probably one of the hardest ones to get into. So yeah, done really well. And it looks like, is that a bucket of champagne you've got in the back on the side of the screen there? It looks like you celebrate.
My
Is
family.
it looked like it was in the far in the background, and the
No.
top of the bottle was poking through. Obviously not. A bit too early for that. But yeah. So a couple of questions that people had, Ali, that I'll ask you about. So, firstly, how did you overcome the VR? I guess how did you get past the difficulties with the verbal reasoning?
VR was still my weakest section. Like I said, I allocated probably disproportionately more time to VR than I did to other sections, but it still did end up being my weakest section. That does tend to just happen naturally because it is one of the hardest sections. People will find that the VR is the lowest. I also was reading a lot more around the time that I sat my second UCAT, and because of that, my vocabulary was better and kind of my just reading comprehension in general was better, which I guess is kind of the skill that they're testing with the VR in the first place, which definitely helped. Um, but I would just say it's one of those things that you just kind of have to practice. You do want to strengthen the sections that you're really good at as much as possible as well, just to kind of compensate if you're finding one of the other sections like VR really difficult. Like QR, you can score really, really highly on it, and people often do. AR as well, once you get really, really good at picking up the patterns, you can score really highly. I don't know if that answers the question, I guess, but
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd say one of the things with VR is being very tactical about about what questions you attempt. So a lot of people look at the size of the passage and they go, is this worth me skimming all of this stuff? And yeah, is it worth me attempting this, or am I better off skipping to a question that I'll have a better stab at? So these are all things that I hate to say practice makes perfect, but these are some things that once you get tactical and you get good at these things, you can establish quite quickly what is gonna essentially just it's like in sport you have game management, and this is like tactical management of the exam. You will have an idea of what you need to do basically to get to the finish line with the grade that you're hoping for. But like Alia said, it's the hardest one, it's the lowest scoring one. One of the things that I kind of didn't talk. The problem with the UCAT is that I could talk about it for, if this webinar was 10 hours, I could probably keep giving you 10 hours worth of useful information. But one of the things you have to bear in mind is the universities that you're applying to, the UCAT. So that some of them will have a different UCAT score requirement. So, for example, like Nottingham has double weighting for the verbal reasoning. Some universities they take the overall highest score, but no one section can be below, let's say, 500. So with Newcastle, I think that's what it is, right? It's like it's a threshold score, which is usually of like 2,900 and like mid 900s, and you basically want to get the highest possible score you can. So for some people, that might be like, well, you know what? If I've got an hour and I spend it on quantitative reasoning, I'll improve that by 50 rather than if I spend an hour on the VR, I might improve it by 20. That'd be amazing, by the way, if you could spend just an hour and improve it by that much. But um, you know, it's the kind of, sometimes it's like the being strategic about where you're placing your time and efforts in relation to what it is you're going for. But obviously, we want to get the best possible score that we can. But you just got to, like, sometimes you can think about these things and like work out where your efforts are best placed, basically. Um, okay, cool. So, um, let's see. So a lot of people are asking kind of like, maybe could you give it almost like not a day in the life, but a kind of a bit of a breakdown of what a revision day of UCAT would look like alongside maybe, the rest of your life that was going on.
Well, at the time when I sat the UCAT, it was a really, really good time for me to sit it because it was summer. Um, I didn't have that much going on apart from the UCAT, like my prep for the application process at the time. I was doing a bit of work experience, but that wasn't until later in the summer. Um, but like I said, I literally just dedicated 2 hours a day to the UCAT, and that was like enough. Sometimes I would do a bit more in the evenings, but I would tend to kind of wake up, do my morning stuff, sit down and get it out of the way as early as possible. So whether that was like a full mock or just running through practice questions or watching videos, whatever it was, and then I would go about my day. Like it doesn't need to consume your entire life, I would say. Like whilst you're prepping for the UCAT, it really doesn't, but you do need to be consistent and you need to be strategic and you need to be structured in your prep. um,
Hmm. Yeah.
do you have anything that you'd like?
No, I think that illustrates exactly what I was saying before. It's about like, it's not, you need to think of the UCAT in the context of everything else, and it's about being prepared ahead of time. And this is why I was saying before, if you have exams coming up now, like, you know, think of the things that you can set on auto. Like, this is what we're doing now for the new students at FutureDoc, right? We're looking at all the stuff that we're putting on autopilot, taking care of everything else, so that we clear the space to focus purely on UCAT. So that's a really important part. And yeah, you touched on another good thing as well, which is like people seem to well, sorry, a lot of the people who do really well, they will say that they do the prep at the same time as they're sitting the exam, so that they're basically used to, at whatever it is, 9 o'clock in the morning, I am in that mode. And when it comes to exam day, it's like I've just had conditioning for the for the last however long, of just being ready to perform at that time. And it's just that consistency, right? It's like the same way I go to the gym at the same time every day. And if I don't, I can notice that I'm either a bit like, if I go earlier, I'm not quite fully awake yet, or if I go later, I kind of feel a bit more tired than I would when I kind of go at my peak time. So yeah, it kind of works a bit like that. So, and another thing that, well, yeah, another thing that Ali mentioned that is really important is not overdoing it and not tiring yourself out. Like, for some people, they will do 2 or 3 hour sessions a day, but if it's one and that's enough to just keep you improving and ticking over, that's really important as well. Okay, cool. So, let's see if there's anything. Could you give tips for each section? We kind of talked about that, haven't we? Um, any other specific tips for specific sections that you remember?
I'm not actually too sure. For each section,
Have a
I
think, and
think that was,
have a think, and
um,
I'll come back to you on that one. Um, let's see. Let me just see if there are any good questions. Is August a good time to take the exam? So I would say when you're thinking about the exam, I would consider three things. The first is allowing enough time to prepare, of course. So having a space, having a time where you can clear the way to just focus really mainly on that. The second is for it to have minimal encroachment on other important life aspects. So that's usually exams, but it could be anything. Like, could be if you've got summer school, or if you've got work experience in the summer. It's like minimal encroachment on that. It could even be like a family wedding or whatever, just so that you can really compartmentalize it from the rest. And the third thing is to do it early enough so that you've got time to think about plan B. Now, plan B used to be UCAT, sorry, BMAT, sorry. It can be GAMSAT still for grads, but also it can just be simply, like I say, it's not all about the UCAT. It's about everything. So it's time for, if you don't quite get the UCAT score that you wanted, it's maybe thinking, okay, well, I can still get in as long as everything else of the application is really strong, as long as I'm choosing universities strategically, as long as my work experience and my personal statement and everything else is really on point, I can still, it's not completely dead. So those are the three things. So, like I say, enough time to prepare, minimal encroachment on other stuff, and early enough so that you can kind of compensate or kind of almost, even if you get a good score, it's kind of like the things that that score is going to probably guide where you think you'll apply, and putting the things in place based on where that navigates you towards, really, ultimately. So I think a few questions around your first application, Alia. What happened? Because you had 2,800.
2,800. Yeah, so that as a UCAT score, that was more than enough. I got 4 interviews with 2,800 the first time. It was like a top decile.
Mm-hmm.
My problem came with my A levels. It wasn't anything to do with my UCAT score when it came for my first application. So, like I said, like I fell behind from the beginning with my A levels, and I just didn't really catch up. That was also the year that they kind of gave us grades, like it was the teacher predicted grades,
Mm-hmm.
and because I just performing well consistently throughout the year, I didn't get the grades that I needed. I had one offer and I didn't get the grades that I needed. So I did a different degree and then reapplied again as a grad.
Yeah. So again, like we've got, so as a grad, it's a different ball game, but also, we've got that grade inflation to think about. And again, it's like thinking about the whole application. Because, I think one of the things, so the way I simplify, it's kind of that thing that Einstein said that simplicity is at the end of complexity. And now I kind of just think about it as two things. I basically, with my students, it's get them in front of the interview, as in whether that's MMI or interview panel, get them in front of the universities that interview, and then after get them past the interview. And I think a lot of people that I see who do get a good UCAT score and don't kind of have the full package is that they'll get lots of interviews, but then not get past the interview. So it's important to have the whole thing and balance it amongst everything else so that we get in. Also, like, the school grades and everything else that we need to make sure that we're getting there. So yeah. Okay, let's probably just wrap it up. But Ali, do you want to give them a bit of a picture of what life's like now at Newcastle as a grad, how you're finding it, and kind of help them understand what the end goal looks like?
I love it. I think it was so worth it, all the effort that I put into applying for medicine the second time around to actually get in. I'm having like such a good time. I get along so well with everyone. I think Newcastle's it's a really good university. You're really, really well supported. This is probably more specific to grad medicine, but it is very, very, very intense. Grad medicine is 4 years, so I'm doing first and second year of regular.
Okay.
I'm doing first and second year of regular medical school in this first year that I'm doing grad med, and because of that, it is very, very intense. But I think with undergraduate medicine, you do get a bit more of a break, but yeah, it was so worth it.
Yeah, I think like med school's really fun, and I really really enjoyed med school. It's like one of the best times of my life. But actually, I think the medicine part of it, once you graduated and once you start working, and like I said at the start, once you start treating patients and really doing a job that's like very impactful but also very tangible with how you're impacting people, I think that's when it really becomes, that's when it really becomes real, and you really like enjoy it most as a job, right? Um, okay, cool. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope you found that useful. Like I say, if you're thinking about joining the program, we're going to be doing one of the things I didn't talk about is mocks, like doing UCAT mocks to get a good picture of where you're at and kind of understand what you need to do. So if you're thinking of joining, we're about in a few weeks' time over the Easter holidays, we'll be doing our first UCAT mock. So that's a really good time to join to think about, because we'll that's where kind of the UCAT training really starts. If you, again, I'll just put the link in the chat again. Like I say, I'll give you a couple of hours, well, a few hours to submit an application before I announce it to everybody else. So like I say, you'll be front of the queue because we only have a few places going out. But it was Oxbridge. Will Oxbridge require really high UCAT scores? Yes, 100%. For Oxbridge, you'll need to be, I think, beyond the first decile. It's the first year they're doing it, so we'll see what their cutoff will be. But I think they will be some of the highest requirements for that. Okay, cool. Well, thank you very much. And like I say, if you want to submit an application, you can do that. But otherwise, keep watching the YouTube channel. We'll give you some more up-to-date tips and tricks and all that sort of stuff. But if you really want to go deep, have a think about maybe if you want to join us. But thank you for coming today, and best of luck with the application. Like I say, prepare really early and really be on the ball with all of that, and just make it as compartmentalized as possible so that you can have a really smooth ride. But Alia, thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. And I hope you have a good rest of your term at Newcastle. All right, see you guys. Take care.